Thumbnails are one of the most important parts of creating a YouTube video, and people always ask me what makes a great one. Over the last few weeks, I've been studying some of the best YouTuber thumbnails, and then I had an idea. What if I remade some of the best thumbnails on the platform? Then not only can I show you what makes a great thumbnail, but I can also break down how you can make them for yourselves. So that's what I did, starting with Canoopsy. Canoopsy is a tech-based channel doing videos on phones, tablets, and laptops. And the thumbnail that I want to focus on is for this video, the OnePlus 9 Pro review, where it simply just punches above the rest. Quite literally. It shows Canoopsy's arm punching through a paper background holding the phone in his hand. It's such a striking and powerful thumbnail that I knew I had to recreate it. Or at least try to. I started off by setting up the backdrop. Canoopsy uses a photography paper background for his, which are super inexpensive, but I didn't really want to go out and buy a whole backdrop for just a single thumbnail. So instead I set up my lighting to illuminate my wall with a bright and vibrant color to make it easier to edit my arm out of the image. I then took a picture of my hand holding the phone in a similar pose to the original thumbnail. After taking the image, I jumped right into Affinity Photo to begin editing. I went ahead and cut out my hand from the background to make it easier for compositing different elements. I then matched the color of the background to Canoopsy's and then went on a search for a paper hole texture. After finding one I liked, I brought it in and blended it into the image. I then had two copies of the hole punch, one for the background and one for the foreground. The one for the foreground I cut in half and placed in front of my arm to make it look as though the hole was around my forearm. I then placed a dark background inside of the hole behind my arm to match Canoopsy's original thumbnail. Now I needed to blend the edges of the paper hole to match the rest of the background, and once I'd done that, I added a gradient highlight from the top of the thumbnail to create a light source for the image. Next, I added a soft shadow of my arm across the background and then started to work on polishing up the phone. With my current image, the phone itself felt a little dull and the reflection on the Apple logo didn't look great, which wasn't good because it was the main subject of the thumbnail. So I added some contrast to make it stand out from the background and gave it a soft blue tint to create a subtle gunmetal look. Once that was done, it was time to make the Apple logo pop, and I did that by adding a graphic over the original phone. I lined it all up and I used that to replace the poor quality version in the original image. With this, I was able to get a lot more creative control to fine-tune the reflection into something that matched the aesthetic of the original thumbnail. I then went and had a little bit of fun by taking the Create tattoo from Canoopsy's arm and then putting it onto mine. So to do that, I took a trip down to my local tattoo parlor and asked them to add one to my arm. Just kidding, I don't actually like needles. So instead, I edited it onto my arm, but with just a small little twist. And after a few more tweaks of contrast and color, I was finally happy with the thumbnail. And comparing them side by side, I think I did a pretty good job. And it just goes to show how a simple idea can really make a striking thumbnail and pack a punch, you could say. Just, you know, with the whole... Okay, I'll stop with the punching jokes now. Moving on to the next thumbnail, which is this beauty by MKBHD. I absolutely love this one. It's simple, not too flashy, and it's packed full of creativity. It does everything a good thumbnail should do, and so I wanted to recreate it for myself. But to start, I needed a Mac to sit on. So I went to Unsplash and searched for a picture of the Mac Studio to use as a foundation for the thumbnail. Doing this first would help me know what kind of angle I would need to take the picture in to help me progress to the next step. With this in mind, I set up the camera, lined myself up, and took a few pictures. As usual, I cut myself out of the original image and angled myself on the edge of the Mac. Now, the biggest thing that sells the effect here is the use of light and shadows. So I used the brush tool to add in fake shadows around my areas of the body that were closer to the edge of the computer, using lighter shadows for things like my feet as they will be further away compared to the rest of my body. For a final touch, I went in and added little highlights to the edges of my body that would reflect the light of the Mac around me. By adding inner shadows and changing the colors to match the surrounding light, I created this really cool light wrap effect around me that makes me look like I'm part of the environment. It's something you see on the original thumbnail, just making him feel like he's a part of the image. Now, while I had fun making this thumbnail and it was pretty tricky to make, the next one proved even more challenging. And it's this one by Airrack, and this thumbnail just looks absolutely incredible. And I knew if I managed to make this one work, well, it would look pretty cool. Plus, I kind of like the idea of scaling a building with two plungers. There is a lot of subtle complexity to this thumbnail that I wanted to try and replicate. For example, the reflection of Airrack inside the window of the skyscraper. That's not just a simple image flip, that is a genuine reflection in the window. I knew from that this was going to be a very tricky thumbnail for me to try and recreate, but first, I needed some plungers. And once they arrived, I set up my camera to take two different pictures. One of me in the original pose and another one as a reflection. Because I'm not using any glass to create that reflection, we're just going to fake it. But that is just between you and me, okay? Shh. Don't tell anybody else. Starting off by cutting me out of the thumbnail and placing me on a background, which turned out to be more difficult than I expected. Not because it was tricky to get the angle right, I just couldn't find a good skyscraper image to use. You'd be surprised trying to find something like that online is actually pretty tricky. And after a long and tedious search, I finally found one that I liked, and then it was time to move on with the rest of the thumbnail. Starting off by warping the edges of the plunger to create the effect of me pushing them down onto the glass. Once that was done, it was time to then bring in the fake reflection, editing me out of the original image and placing me within the glass of the skyscraper. It was at this point in time that I realized I had taken the photo completely wrong. Airrack's pose was the reverse of mine, so instead of retaking the picture, I decided to just flip the image. What? Don't judge me, I can be lazy too sometimes. I then made a copy of myself and used it to create a fake shadow underneath my body to sell the effect of me being close to the glass. I also added shadows underneath the plungers to make it feel like there was contact between them and the glass. Now my reflection looked pretty realistic as it was, but I decided to add my face to it as well to make it look more closer to the original thumbnail. A lot of the work on this thumbnail was just fine tuning, adding exposure and contrast, and a ton of tweaks to the reflection and the position of the building to make it look just right. Now there are a lot of advanced techniques and methods that I've used in this video to create these thumbnails, and I teach you these exact same techniques inside of my upcoming thumbnail workshop. So if you want to learn to improve your thumbnail game, then go ahead and check that out using the link down below in the description. And not only that, but also go into more thumbnail tips and tricks in this video right here. So go ahead and check out that video next, and until next time, take care.